Welcome to the Guibord Center's presentation on There's Something About Mary, Why Different Religions Revere Her. We probably should have entitled this, Why Followers of Different Religions Revere Her, because we find that there are followers of religions all over the world that find something about Mary that's hard to identify, that they are moved by. This conversation has been very important to the Guibord Center, and we've wanted to do it for many, many years, because we need to find those forces in the world today that unify us, that help us find something larger than ourselves, that help us find a path to healing. Mary was very important to Gwen Guibord, the founder of the Guibord Center. When Gwen became a priest, she found herself drawn into the rosary, and she found a kind of strength from that helped her get through the different challenges of creating the Guibord Center, and later in her life, the challenges of getting through stage 4 cancer while she was doing it. It was that relationship with Mary that gave her a sense of calm in her body and in her life. For me, my relationship with Mary was somewhat different. I grew up as a Christian who was in love with the Jesus of the Sermon on the Mount. And I always thought of Mary as that person in white and blue who stood in front of certain churches. She was out there, not someone who was connected with me. That was until 1972. And in the summer of 1972, I had the opportunity to join a pilgrimage that traveled to holy sites around the world over a number of months. And our last stop in that journey was the Vatican. Now, I had prayed in temples in the forests of northern Japan. I had prayed in temples in Kathmandu when Nepal had just been opened for travelers for the West. I had been in India during the monsoons in temples with gods and goddesses, with representations of deities whose names I couldn't pronounce. I had been in Karnak and Cairo, but I found myself that September morning standing at the entrance to the Vatican, wondering why I was there, because I wasn't Catholic, and organized Christianity had little hold over me. I knew that I wanted to see the Pieta because I loved the work of Michelangelo. And I realized that he and I were the same age as I stepped through that door. And he had completed the Pieta by then. In 1972, September, the Pieta had been damaged. It was damaged in May of that year. And it was off to the side with guards. And when I stepped through the door and turned towards the statue, something happened. I've been a therapist for 40 years and I still can't explain it. All I can say is I suddenly found myself facing Mary of the Pieta, who wasn't damaged. She was a whole figure. I don't know how that happened. What I do know is that I expected to find grief. But that as I stood there and I saw that ocean of robes on her lap and felt the weight of her dead son on her shoulder, how do I put it into words? It was as if an energy penetrated me that came from her. It touched my cells. And what I felt was, it wasn't acceptance. It was more than acceptance. What I felt what I was enveloped in was a kind of peace that was transportive. I was taken out of my life and into a sense of something so vast, so powerful, that I can't put words to it. And then a moment later, I was standing there, having stepped through the doorway. I've never shared that story publicly before. I'd never shared it to anyone until a few weeks ago. And I was shocked by the experience because I had no relationship with Mary. I didn't belong to her. I wasn't one of hers. And yet she came to me. She touched me in a way that has forever blessed my life. And I share the story today because I believe that there are millions of people out there who have been touched by Mary. I believe there's something about Mary. And that's what we're here to explore today. And I can think of no one better to start us off in that conversation than my friend Ray Mattis. Ray is a psychotherapist. He's a gerontologist. He is the chair of the Immaculate Heart Board of Trustees. He's a pastoral theologian. He's served as a long-term care administrator and a spiritual director. And he touched my heart last summer when I had the privilege of attending a 3-day retreat that he did for the Immaculate Heart community, when he spoke about their founder. And he did it in such a way that I found myself, not a member of the community, still touched and transformed. And so I give you Ray Mattis.
Thanks so much, Lo. It's a pleasure to be here to share some thoughts about Mary, the mother of Jesus. But before I do, I'd like to take a brief moment to speak about the lens through which I intend to approach this presentation. As a pastoral theologian, my area of study is on praxis, the ways in which belief is born out of and shaped by the ordinary events of life. My intent this afternoon is to provide with broad brushstrokes a general overview about the person of Mary from the narrative stories about her in the Christian scriptures, as well as some of the first centuries of the Christian church, all with the overarching question of what might the stories of Mary's life and the experiences of her offer for our contemporary times. The fact is, the Christian scriptures, commonly referred to as the New Testament, provide very little information about Mary. The first of the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Mark, written approximately 70 CE, mentions her only twice. She is first referenced after Jesus has begun his public ministry, in a scene where a large crowd has gathered to hear him. It has caused quite a stir, and his family, having heard about it, set out to, quoting the gospel passage, seize him because they felt he had gone mad. The story continues that Mary and his brothers and sisters arrive. The gathered crowd informs him of their presence, to which he replies with a question for the crowd as to who is his mother and his brothers. Jesus proceeds to answer his own question by stating that his mother and brothers are those who do the will of God. Later on in that Gospel of Mark, there is a scene where Jesus returns to his hometown of Nazareth, and a group question his credentials and his authority by which he speaks, and refer to him in somewhat derogatory terms as the carpenter, son of Mary. Both references allude to a seeming tension between Jesus and his family regarding the understanding of his chosen path. And Mary is not mentioned again. The Gospel according to Matthew, written between 80 and 90 CE, begins with a genealogical roadmap. It traces a line of lineal ancestry from Abraham to Jesus, the purpose of which is to create a narrative of the fulfillment of prophecy. Mary is mentioned in the infancy narratives regarding Jesus' birth that speak of real risk and uncertainty. She is presented as being betrothed, yet not legally married to a man named Joseph, and that before the two have lived together, she is found with child through the Holy Spirit. In this narrative, it is Joseph, not Mary, that encounters an angel who reassures and reminds him of the words of the prophets, particularly that a virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call him Emmanuel. The narrative continues to include a description of foreign visitors who seek out the child, and when they find him, they find the child with his mother, Mary. There is a warning given in the form of another dream of Joseph to escape with Mary and Jesus, and a third dream instructing them to return to the land from which they came. The final mention of Mary in Matthew's Gospel is similar to the one detailed in Mark's. The episode where Jesus, engaged in speaking, is informed that his mother and brothers are outside and wish to speak with him. The same response by Jesus is recorded. Mary is not mentioned again. The Gospel according to Luke offers the most accounts of Mary of the four canonical Gospels in the Christian scriptures. Written approximately 85 CE, it is divided into 2 volumes, which are written as a story anchored in a particular history, and as such serves to place Jesus within a historical context of a divine plan for humanity. Within the 2 volumes, Luke places Mary in the context of fidelity and discipleship. Luke's inclusion of an infancy narrative of Jesus provides for a theme of call and response. The call of Mary by the angel Gabriel, and her response of yes to the seemingly improbable event of her pregnancy. Mary's encounter with an older relative, Elizabeth, who is also pregnant. The exchange between these 2 women provide the context where Mary's response to Elizabeth's greeting is recorded in the form of a hymn of praise, known as the Magnificat. It summarizes the prophetic statements from the Hebrew scriptures. This is followed by the birth story of Jesus, where ordinary individuals, those on the margins, come to admire the event. To these events, Luke ascribes the notion that Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. It is followed by ritual of presenting the child Jesus in the temple, the encounter with 2 elders, and the exchange of a stark prophecy addressed directly to Mary about her child's future, and preparatory caution to her, a pending sorrow. There is the scene of the annual pilgrimage the family makes to Jerusalem, where Jesus, now 12, is missing, and the encounter between him and Mary when he is found. Like the 2 previous Gospels of Mark and Matthew, there is the account of Jesus' rejection from his hometown, the encounter of Mary and his family. After this account, Mary does not appear again until the 2nd volume, the Acts of the Apostles, where she is reported as being present among the followers of Jesus who have gathered together after his death and resurrection and collectively receive the Holy Spirit, forming a community. The Gospel according to Luke, written approximately 900 to 100 CE, like Mark, does not include an infancy narrative, However, Mary is pivotal in the story, which is meant to establish the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. It is not a repeated story of the previous three Gospels, but rather one centered on a major life event placed in the context of a potentially embarrassing situation. There is a wedding feast, which both mother and son attend. Mary becomes aware that the hosts have run out of wine, and she goes to Jesus, informing him of this situation. His response is both off-putting and dismissive. "What business is it of mine?" he responds. Mary doesn't answer him, but rather goes directly to the head steward and simply states, "Do whatever he tells you." Mary is not mentioned again until the end of this gospel, where she is reported to be at the foot of the cross along with other followers of Jesus, specifically named Mary Magdalene, her sister Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and an unnamed beloved disciple. Jesus entrusts Mary to his beloved disciple and entrusts the beloved disciple to her. It is an exchange of mutuality and support. And unlike the other three Gospels, John places Mary at the beginning of Jesus' public ministry, not in a passive or questioning way, but rather one that speaks of implicit authority. She appears at the end, entrusted into a community of mutuality and care. Now, beyond those gospel accounts, writing about Mary does not appear until well into the 2nd century within Christianity. The first biography of her, an apocryphal text entitled the Proto-Evangelium of James, provides additional information about her background and life story. It names her parents, tells a miraculous story of her own birth, her betrothal to Joseph, the Annunciation and birth of Jesus. Its focus on Mary serves to honor her story by filling in aspects of her life not contained within the gospel accounts, and acknowledges the place she holds within the Christian tradition. While not part of the canon of Christian scriptures, aspects of Mary's life told within this text would have influential effects on how the narrative about her is passed down through the centuries. The earliest known recorded hymn honoring Mary and invoking her assistance is known and can be translated as "Beneath Your Compassion." It is a fragment of parchment dating back to the late 3rd century. It has been translated as follows: "Beneath your compassion, we take refuge, O Mother of God. Do not despise our petitions in time of trouble, but rescue us from dangers, only pure, only blessed one." Theologian Stephen Shoemaker, in his book Mary and the Early Christian Faith and Devotion, states that such invocation to Mary indicates that at least some segments of the early Christian community, in its pattern of worship and piety, developed an interest in her before the development of any doctrinal beliefs around her emerged. What little was known about her resonated with the early Christian community, and, as we heard from Lo's introduction, continues to do so today. Perhaps it's the very fact that there exists gaps in her story that pique interest and invite a connection with her, a desire to fill those gaps by engaging with the stories of her life and relating those events she experienced to situations, encounters, and life's circumstances that are experienced in the day-to-day ordinary living of life. Such connections allow for familiarity and comfort. If we look back on the gospel narratives about Mary, they reveal genuine human experiences which at their core are relatable. Family tensions, misunderstandings about personal call and life choices, the relinquishment of expectations, the inevitability of change, loss, and suffering, the yes pronounced in faith without assurance of outcome. These snippets of her life reveal threshold moments. Author Joyce Rupp states that the metaphor of a threshold aptly describes a vital component on our spiritual journey. The gift of the threshold provides a way to cross over into a fuller life of spiritual depth and freedom. And certainly those moments, those little snippets of Mary's life contained in the Christian scriptures and within the first centuries of the Christian community, allude to those opportunities and moments that allowed her to enter into fuller life of spiritual depth and freedom. In the words of the earliest hymn of invocation, "Beneath your compassion," Mary's compassion, a human element of her ability to share the circumstances that one faces in a relatable way, perhaps that is the something about Mary. Mary's yes to her God's personal invitation for her life. Mary, filled with promise, hope, and a great deal of uncertainty, journeys in hospitality toward the other. Mary pondering deeply the circumstances that life presented her. Mary compassionately entering into the struggles and pains of the human condition. These are at the core of the narratives about Mary. Through these, Mary becomes both a model of faith and a companion on the journey of life. In her relatability, in the gaps of her story, she offers an outstretched hand in friendship when the circumstances of life call for a mutuality of understanding and needed support. While I've experienced Mary's presence throughout the years, one particular experience came to mind in preparation for this afternoon. About 15 years ago, I had the opportunity of participating in an interfaith pilgrimage to Israel to visit the sacred sites of the Abrahamic faiths. It had been a long journey and not a smooth one by any stretch. Tired and yet excited, our first scheduled stop was the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth, the place that tradition holds Mary encountered the angel Gabriel. Our group arrived late, missing our scheduled time inside the church. We gathered together outside in the courtyard, and after brief introduction to our surroundings and its history, the religious guides that accompanied us, an Episcopal priest, a Roman Catholic deacon, a rabbi, and an imam, led us in a prayer service. As the prayer service unfolded, I found myself scanning the large courtyard, noticing that its walls were lined with images of Mary, some small and others big. As I looked at them more closely, I realized that each image came from a different country and that Mary was depicted in multiple nationalities. As I looked at the images around me, I heard the imam begin reading what sounded like a familiar story of the Annunciation. Lost in my awareness of the various images, tired from the journey, I began to walk around the courtyard and around the church itself, gazing and allowing my eyes to fall on the various images of Mary. When I returned to the group, focusing my attention once again on what was being read, I realized that it was not the familiar version of the Annunciation from Luke's Gospel. It was in that moment, hearing for the first time the words of the Holy Qur'an about Mary, surrounded by the images of her from around the world, companioned by 39 other pilgrims, with different belief systems that I vividly experienced the first line of that ancient hymn, "Beneath your compassion." I'd like to close this segment about Mary with a quote from theologian Maria Bolding from her book, The Coming of God. Maria writes about Mary: like the prophets and the anonymous believers before her, she let go of familiar, intangible patterns and ways of relating to God and the universe, and those frameworks which had genuinely supported meaning hitherto, and were indeed God-given. She said yes to the beyond. She let go of her securities, faced the misunderstandings, bore the shame, accepted her own bewilderment and risk. She was herself reborn to a new existence, that she might bring forth life for many. There was joy for her and an awareness of life. She danced with the beyond that was within. So as we gather today, may we, like Mary, dance with the beyond that is within each of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. That was very, very rich. Oh my goodness. And I've been in that courtyard, and it does give one that transformative experience that she is known and beloved throughout the world. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Sophia Pandya, who is professor and chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Cal State University in Long Beach, winner of Cal State University Long Beach's 2016 Advancement of Women Award from the President's Commission on the Status of Women. She's been a Fulbright scholar. She's studied and specializes in women and Islam and in contemporary movements within Islam. She is not only an author, she is someone whose heart is open and looking for a deeper meaning in what's happening around us. In some ways, it goes back to Ray's mention of what are the gaps in people's lives. She's currently working on a book that touched me about the stories of Turkish refugees and the meaning that they find or construct from their ordeal. That's our faith in action. When I first approached Sophia to be a speaker for today, I took a little look at her student reviews, and I have to tell you that her students adore her and give her the highest marks that are available. And I spoke with my dear friend, who many of you know, Imam Jihad Turk, yesterday, and mentioned that she would be here. And he said, "You got the best." So I think that that's true. She's just back from Europe, and I'm delighted to have her with us today and very grateful that she's here. Sophia, please share with us about Maryam, as she's known in Islam and the Holy Qur'an.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Lo. And I'd like to thank yourself, Dr. Lo Sprague, and also the Guibord Center for inviting me today to speak. It's quite an honor. I'd like to share a screen with a PowerPoint that I'm going to talk about Mary in Islam today. This is a Persian miniature. It's just lovely of Mary holding baby Islam. While some Muslims don't believe that you can create drawings or pictures or art with faces, the Persians did. And you can see how beautiful that image is. So there's a quote here. The angels said to Mary, "O Mary, indeed Allah has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above the women of the worlds." And that's Surah Al-Imran from the Quran, verse 42. So as an introduction here, Mary, or Maryam in Arabic, is a sacred figure in Islam, and she is the Virgin Mother of the Prophet Jesus. In Arabic, that's Isa. Not only do we have a large body of scriptural information on Maryam, but her legacy is strongly felt in contemporary times. So I'm going to give you some background about Maryam, but also how she is a shared figure amongst Christians, Muslims, and Jews in, even today. There's another lovely Persian miniature. So she's known as Maryam bint Imran, which means that she's the daughter of Imran. She's known in Islam as the greatest of all women for all time. And she's known as by the honorific Hazrat Maryam, and there's many other titles that she holds. But she's the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran 70 times at least, and she's mentioned more frequently than in the New Testament, by the way. And there's a whole chapter, Surah 19, which is named after her. So like the Bible, Maryam the Virgin is the mother of Prophet Jesus, or Prophet Isa. As stories about Maryam appear in the Quran, Surahs 3, 4, 5, 19, 20, 21, 23, 66. But you can also find additional information about Maryam in the Hadith literature. Hadith literature, that's the body of literature that has to do with the sayings and activities of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but also in the stories of the prophets and in the Sufi traditions. So Hazrat Maryam's birth and childhood. Her father is Imran, but her mother is named Hannah, and she, before Maryam was born, she saw a bird in its nest feeding its chicks, and then she herself yearned for a child. She thought her first child would be a boy, and so she consecrated her future boy to God, to service of God in a temple. And of course, we know that a girl was born. And so after Maryam was born, God accepted that she served him in the temple. And so she was taken to the temple after she weaned. She was guarded in this temple by Prophet Zechariah during her childhood. And one day, Zechariah found her with summer fruit in the wintertime and winter fruit in the summertime. And so that's quite a miracle. As a child, God let her know that a word, or kalima, was cast into her. So that of Isa, or Jesus. There's lots of miracles attributed to Maryam in Islam. And indeed, this image here says Maryam bint Imran in Arabic calligraphy. So she's born sinless, untouched by Satan. She receives this kalima, word of God. And she always has food in the temple, even when nobody gave her food. They just find her with sustenance in the temple. And of course, the fruit that's produced out of season. And Zechariah himself yearns for a son. And so Mary provides him with fruit that's out of season. And so he eats this fruit out of season. And in fact, he's able to, his wife gives birth to a son, Yahya or John. And of course, I would be in trouble if I didn't mention that the biggest miracle that Maryam has of all is that she gives birth to Jesus. So let's think about this birth of Isa. How does that occur? The angel Gabriel comes to her and informs Maryam that she's going to bear a son. And of course, she's very confused and surprised by this. And she says, how can this happen? I'm not married. I've never laid with a man. And she also adds, I'm not a whore, how will this happen? So God, through Gabriel, blows ruh, which means spirit, into Maryam. Okay, so it's also the breath of God, right? That's this ruh. So blows it into Maryam, and this ruh enters either through her hem of her dress, or the sleeve of her dress, or through her mouth. And according to Hadith literature, Yusuf or Joseph is also surprised that Maryam is pregnant and asks, how can she be with child? In the Quran, there's no mention of Joseph at all. So this is the Hadith literature, the additional literature about the sayings and doings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So Maryam explains that indeed she is pregnant, and that God created the first, agricultural crop from nothing, and thus God can do what God does. So Maryam labors under a palm tree, and you see this image here, another Persian miniature of her shaking a palm tree, right? So God tells her, you should shake the palm tree, and then God allows lots of dates to rain upon her. And God also provides her with water. You see, in the miniature down here, you see some water in the little spring. So she's provided with food and water again, right? That's another miracle. When she does give birth to Isa and returns to her family, though, they are very shocked, understandably so. And so this is where you get a little deviance from the Christian version of Jesus and the Christian version of the birth story, because in the Quran, baby Jesus or baby Isa can talk. Okay, he speaks. And one of the first things that Isa does is he exonerates his mother, and he declares, I am God's slave. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. And so he goes on to point out that, that Maryam is innocent. So when we think about the Islamic Maryam, so this image is of the Islamic Maryam in a Persian miniature, and this one is of the Christian Mary. So Mary is fully human and not part of any trinity. Neither is Jesus part of any trinity, nor is she the mother of God. So Jesus in Islam is the messenger of God, but not, so Jesus is a prophet in Islam, but Jesus is not the Son of God. In Christianity, Mary is the Holy Mother of Jesus, the Son of God. So there we have some clear distinctions, but there's so many parallels. So when we think about the legacy of Maryam, Maryam is an example for all Muslims, not just women Muslims, but also for men. And how is she an example? Because she's considered to be chaste and obedient and pure and devout and quite pious. Dozens of mosques are named after her, and I have some images of those mosques. She's especially revered in Sufi Islam. Some Sufis pray to her. Some Sufis especially are, like to talk about her, Mary's piety. They also like to talk about Maryam as, she's symbolized by a rose. And so that's just something very mystical. And then there's in Africa, in fact, there's a tariqa or a Sufi order that's named after her. So that would be the Maryamiya tariqa. So there's a whole Sufi order devoted to Mary. So she's a shared symbol for Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others. And I'm going to talk about this, the shared symbol now, and the contemporary relevance of Mary. So in 1968, in Egypt, an apparition of the Virgin Mary, or Maryam, appeared on a Coptic church in the town of Zaytun, Egypt, and was recognized and seen by hundreds of Christians, Coptic Christians, and Muslims in Egypt. Even the government acknowledged that this apparition took place. So this took place after the 6-day war with Israel, and it lifted and unified Egyptian spirits, both Christian and Muslim. And so this is an image that you can find of this apparition. And then in Syria in 1982, Mary or Maryam's apparitions in the Damascus neighborhood of Sufaniya began. And since then, both Muslims and Christians flock to see her. They take pilgrimages. And so you see one thing that happens in this neighborhood of Sufania is that Mary's image begins to sweat oil. Okay, so you see the oil coming out of the image to the right here. There's similar phenomenon that takes place in Harissa, Lebanon, and Fatima, Portugal, where you have both Muslims and Christians flocking to see apparitions of Maryam or Mary. And then here is an image of a mosque that was renamed Maryam Isa Mosque in Abu Dhabi. And here we have another mosque. This is the Mosque Maryam in Chicago. There's dozens of mosques that are named after Mary. So in conclusion, Hazrat Maryam is a figure sacred to Muslims. There are many parallels to the Christian Mary, such as the virgin birth, the idea that she's the mother of Jesus or Isa, the idea that she should be a role model for all. However, the Muslim Maryam gives birth under a palm tree, and neither she nor Isa, Jesus, is divine. Yet Mary or Maryam is a powerful and fertile symbol of unity for all faiths. Thank you very much.
That was lovely, Sophia. Just charming, absolutely charming. I love the way of solving the issue of no images in Islam by using the ones that you found. It was lovely. Thank you so very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Rini Ghosh. Rini is a member of the board of directors of the Guibord Center. She's also served and is on the board of Vedanta Society of Southern California. She's the president of Vedanta International Cultural Center, director and parliamentarian of the United Nations Association, Pacific Los Angeles chapter. Born and educated in India, Rini has been a lifelong peace activist and a steadfast follower of Swami Vivekananda and Mahatma Gandhi. She is a passionate advocate of interfaith cooperation throughout the world. And more than that, Rini is in many ways serves as the mom of the youth program at the Guibord Center. She's the one that everyone turns to. She's the one who always shows up with the meals or works out the meals. And she has a way of making her love of youth and her love of the sacred manifest in very real and very practical ways. So let me introduce to you now Dr. Rini Ghosh, who is going to share with us how it is that Hindus come to revere Mary, the mother of Jesus. Rini.
Thank you so much, Lo. I hope I live up to all that you've said about me. Let me begin with a typical Indian greeting, Namaste, which means the divine in me honors the divine in you, honors that divinity which is in each one of us. We acknowledge that we are all one, humans, animals, bugs, plants, all interrelated in this cosmic oneness. I'm so honored and blessed to be participating with my revered panelists in this magnificent discussion. Thanks to Dr. Lo and the Guibord Center for coming up with this brilliant topic. Now, Christianity was brought to India in 52 AD by St. Thomas, one of the disciples of Jesus Christ, and the first Catholic church was established on the southern shores of India. I guess many of you didn't know that Christianity came that early to India. These churches were, of course, nothing like the grand structures built later, but flourished side by side with the Hindu temples. In 1498, however, the famous Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed to Kerala to open up the first Europe-India sea route. Imagine his surprise when he found Christians already there. Once European Christianity arrived, life was never the same again for Christians, but the history of the community was moving ahead fast and progressively. In India, a country where Christians account for only about 2.3% of the total vast population, the image and iconography of Mother Mary, the Blessed Virgin, are venerated by untold millions of Hindus. Devotion to Virgin Mary in India takes many forms, from simple shrines in private homes like mine, right next to the Hindu gods and goddesses, to pilgrimage to public Marian shrines which are found all over the country. Mother Mary seems to be a perfect fit in the tradition of mother worship and feminine power veneration of the Hindus. The mother goddess has always been venerated in India from the earliest times. The Hindus have the concept of Trimurti or Trinity, which consists of Brahman, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer or the recycler. But in the background, we have the complex interplay of the divine principle of the balance of the male and female, manifesting itself in the divine cosmic energy of the mother. She is the primordial power. The masculine is inert without the feminine. The creator will create, but has to have the divine energy to propel that creation. This divine energy is the divine feminine, the mother of all. We have a long history of respect, love, and adoration of mother goddess figures. Mary Mata, Mata means mother, is one of our adored mothers to whom we can go for love, forgiveness, and even to fulfill our aspirations and answer our prayers. Just like Sita, the ideal of womanhood, or Yasoda, the mother of Krishna, who was the reincarnation of Vishnu. Mother Mary is not known for her sophisticated teachings and doctrines, but for her limitless love, tenderness, and compassion for all. All these mother goddesses do not let the devotees stop at themselves, but always help, energize, and guide the devotees to proceed in their ultimate spiritual journey to that divine power. They are the ideal women, ideal mothers, immortal role models. They are the mothers of the ultimate divine reality. While visiting a friend's garden around the late 1950s, Thakur Ramakrishna, who is the founder of our Vedanta order and one of the great spiritual forces of the Neo-Vedanta movement in the 19th century, saw a beautiful painting of the Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus. And his friend read him captivating biblical sayings. Ramakrishna at once went into ecstasy, looking at that beautiful picture. When he woke up from this ecstasy, he was given that photo. He carried that Mary holding baby Jesus to his room in Dakshineshwar Kali temple where he lived. This picture of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus is still in his room at Dakshineshwar. Honoring this event, even now, several of our Vedanta Society temples, known as Ramakrishna Mott and Ramakrishna Mission, with 221 centers all over the world, have on their altar a picture of Mother Mary with baby Jesus. You can see this Madonna venerated and worshipped on the altar of the Vedanta Society of Southern California in our Hollywood Center. And one of our popular hymns, I might say, is Jaya Sharedeshwari Sita Radha Mata Mary, Yoshodhara Vishnu Priyama, which means victory to our Divine Mother Sarada, Sita, Radha, and Mother Mary. To Yasodhara's universal motherhood, salutations to you, O Mother, O Mother. Here I must relate a personal experience. As a child, I came from a very traditional joint Hindu family. However, to further my education, I had to complete the last 3 years of my schooling in one of the convent schools in India under the Irish nuns. I missed my large family a lot, So especially in the beginning, I spent a lot of my time in the serene school chapel in front of the regal statue of Virgin Mary. During those times of peaceful contemplation, I slowly started to see the oneness between Mother Mary and our Sharada Ma, who is our family's divine mother. I found so much commonality between the two. They were one and the same, merging into each other. I could ask for all my wishes to be fulfilled by that mother standing in front of me in all her regal splendor, yet in all her simplicity. And I wouldn't even realize when that statue turned into the holy picture or the Holy Mother or the statue of our Holy Mother, Sharadama. It was 1960s, interfaith wasn't a common practice. So much to my disappointment, whenever I tried to explain this to my friends, they laughed it off. But three very important people in my life encouraged me in this journey of mine. Mother Joseph Antonio, an 85-year-old, most brilliant Irish nun and teacher extraordinaire. And of course, my grandmother and my mother. The three of them encouraged me to think along these lines because, as they reaffirmed, this is written in the whole old Hindu scriptures, the Rig Veda, which affirms, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one. Sages call it by various names. As Swami Vivekananda suggested, casual visitors to this ancient land of India carry away with them the impressions of an elaborate polytheism. True it is that India always had many gods and still has many gods, but in appearance only. In reality, she has but one God. Though with prodigal inventiveness, she has called him by various names, him or her by various names. My excitement knew no bounds when from 1990s, Father Francis Clooney of the Harvard Divinity School started authoring his articles and books on comparative theology. In his book, Divine Mother, Blessed Mother, Hindu Goddesses and the Blessed Virgin Mary, he studies three beautiful hymns, respectively praising the Hindu goddesses Sri Lakshmi, Devi, and Apirami, and then reconnects beautifully with the Catholic Christian tradition by attention to the Blessed Virgin Mary, not a goddess to be sure, but that superlative woman of the Catholic piety who stands in an extraordinary position in the Catholic and Orthodox traditions. To balance the goddess hymns, he reads three Marian hymns. It's incredible how he combines the two and lays bare the process why and how Mary is so revered by the Hindus. It leads us to images of God and humanity and what to make of the varied religious experiences of the human race, opening us to the truth. Dr. Dempsey, Corinne Dempsey, Associate Professor at Nazareth College outside Rochester, New York, told the International Business Times that Mother Mary enjoys a powerful following in several parts of India. She is the patron of many prominent churches and is the focus of famous pilgrimage sites visited by Hindus as well as Christians as well as Muslims. Mary is understood to be a source of blessings and miracles. If she is a source of power and comfort for her Christian devotees, there is no reason she should not be a powerful for Hindu devotees as well. Andrew Walker, Dr. Andrew Walker, professor of theology at King's College in Oxford, indicated that Mary Mother fits perfectly into India's tradition of Mother Goddess veneration. And Dr. Matthias Franz in Bonn, Germany, posits that Mary strikes a deep chord in many Indians, regardless of faith. Mary is the mother par excellence, he told the International Business Times. For her devotees, Christians and non-Christians alike, she embodies the ideal of a benign and well-wishing mother. But particularly for Indians, who not coincidentally refer to their nation as Mother India. The motherly figure has an immediate emotional appeal because people can connect their own family experiences with Mary. Friends further noted that understanding the mother does not require theological expertise, nor even any biblical knowledge. Visitors of Marian shrines in India rarely care about any theology, but they follow the call of their mother. One of the interesting facts of Marian shrines in India is that Mary has supremacy even over baby Jesus to many Hindus there. Indeed, in the devotee's mind, Mary is the powerful mother who takes care of her children, her devotees. At any rate, perhaps the devotion to Mary across India reflects a kind of universality in the world's faith that sometimes gets lost in the constant debate between East and West. God is bigger than anything we can imagine. As human beings, we need to realize this. Anyone who's devoted to Our Lady is on the right track. It was never known that anyone who fled to her protection was left unaided. Mary will never let any devotee stop at her, says Friends, but will always lead people to the ultimate power, that divine power of God. As a consequence, every village and town over time has many Hindu and Catholic shrines located in close contiguity. An outstanding example is again a shrine of Our Lady of Velankani, located at the central plaza of the city of Margao, which also displays an image of Damodar, the Hindu deity of the city. So these are all side by side, and both the images have so many miracles that ascribe to them. So both of them are worshipped all together at the same time, and the offerings are amazing. Some people even offer to Mary, Our Lady of Velankani. We've seen offerings of cigarettes, modern cigarettes being offered with the filter tips and flowers and candles, whereas the Hindu god, Margao, the Damodar, he was offered tobacco leaves and incense. So the offerings are different, but the offerings are there and the miracles are always coming. The 20th and 21st century has been referred to as the Mariological Age. There has been many Marian aspirations as in the 20th century. The Blessed Mothers all over the world are doing everything, it seems, to draw her children to the divine way. In India, according to believers, from the 1500s, there were several miracles that happened during apparitions of the Virgin Mary. In Velankani, India, it is known as Our Lady of Good Health. In fact, Pope Francis termed it as the Lourdes of the East, because there were so many miracles of people getting well after visiting that shrine, etc. There was a crippled boy who, in front of even the eyes of the press and the media, he got well. So there were many miracles. Another miracle, which is very famous, of the Velankani Lady of Good Health, is a shepherd boy who was carrying milk for his master. It was a very warm day, so he sat under the tree and fell asleep. After a strong gust of wind began to blow, he woke up and was startled to see an apparition of Mary standing before him, holding a child in her arms. Both Mary and the child had a glow of white light emanating from them. Mary asked Tamil if he would give her son milk for her son. Tamil agreed. The child then drank all the milk that Tamil offered. When Tamil went back to his master became very angry that there was no milk. He had brought no milk. He has given away all the milk. So when Tamil was very sad, but he started looking inside the pot, maybe there was some things left. He saw how much milk was left over. He saw that the pot was miraculously filling up. It kept filling up until the milk spilled out over top of the brim. And this reminds everyone of the fish and the bread miracles of Jesus Christ. So astonished, Tamil and his master ran back to the pond, and Mary and the child appeared to them as an encouraging vision before disappearing. Thereafter, the pond became known as Mata Kulam, which means Our Lady's Pond. Even both Hindu and Catholic school children in India claim to have witnessed an apparition of Christ and several appearances of the Virgin Mary accompanied by the scent of sweet jasmine, the gift of contrition and the healing of even a girl's ear problem. We have another one of Mary's shrine in northern India. She's called Dhori Mata, India's miraculous mother of the coal mines. The October festival dedicated to Dhori Mata in a village in North Indian state of Jharkhand is preceded by a 9-day novena. During this time, the field surrounding the shrine is prepared for the open-air mass, and thousands of people attend it. And there are vendors and shops are set up. The festival itself begins with the raising of the banner to the south, to the shouts of Dhori Mata ki jai, victory to Dhori Mata. Dhori Mata takes a place among a number of Catholic Black Madonnas, such as the Black Madonna of Czechoslovakia. In many ways, Dhori Mata is treated in a similar way as would a relic that represents a tangible memorial of a saint. In her shrine, Dhori Mata usually rests on a high column, but during the festival, she comes down to be close to her devotees. She is honored with flower petals and by pilgrims and devotees touching their foreheads to her feet, a sign of deep respect in Indian culture. Some devotees and pilgrims refer to Dhori Mata's tabernacle by using the Hindi word ashiana, meaning a small dwelling or nest that is built with devotion and love. Dhori Mata is known as a miracle worker. Pilgrims often make a vow or mannat in which they petition Dhori Mata for a particular favor, and if that favor is granted, they fulfill their vow by crowning her and having their hair cut and placed at her feet. Then there are reported incidents of possession of the soul by various deities and subsequent miracles happening, which have been common in various villages amongst Hindu and Christian people, even in the dargahs of Islam. A presentation on November 2012 by Kristen Bloomer, visiting assistant professor of women's studies in South Asian religions at Harvard Divinity School. She gives the whole description how Mary, the soul of Mary, possessed the souls of Yvette Gomez and Nancy, these two cured devotees, irrespective of their religion, of various ailments. These incidents, it seems, are common in certain parts of Europe too, like southern India. As Hindus are spreading all over the world, we have reports of Virgin Mary and Mother Kali. Christians share a church with Hindus in Trinidad, West Indies, Caribbean. Since the 1870s, the Roman Catholic Church in Trinidad and Tobago and in West Indies has been transferred into a Hindu temple. But for only one day each year, on Good Friday, the church is shared with thousands of Hindus who pay homage to the dark-skinned wooden statue of Virgin Mary, whom they worship as Mother Kali, and hundreds of Christians flock there to worship the Mother Kali, Virgin Mary, whatever you may call her, what's in her name. The story in the Hindu books that thousands of years ago, when planet Earth was ruled by demons and they were killing all good people, the Supreme Mother became very angry and she took the form of Goddess Kali and killed all the demons, which basically means the demons within us. So I conclude with the saying that this goddess is believed to be very compassionate. This is the ferocious feminine form full of compassion in all our mothers. We do owe our mothers a great deal of indebtedness. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Daya Rupena Shanstita Namastaswai 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 Namo Nama. She is the protection, she is the power, she the nature, she is everywhere. She is the mother, she is the sister, she is the wife, she is the one who cares. In Chandi Path from the Argala Stotram, Devi is Shakti, that is energy. Anyone worshipping that energy, that mother, is full of energy herself. The depiction in this ancient chant shows various forms of the mother, the Devi, the Shakti, the energy. This is the real knowledge and wisdom the power of this mother can grant is beyond any scale. So let's fold our hands to that Divine Mother and pray for the salvation of this whole world when we are going through these times of COVID, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rini. That was fabulous. And I appreciate you sharing the Mary as mother with us. As I said in your introduction, you carry that wonderful energy of being mom to many of our youth, and we're deeply grateful for it. Oh my goodness. As I listen to our three speakers, I'm looking for some questions, but I have a question that actually I'd like to turn to our speakers with. And that is that when I just heard you speak, Rini, I was aware of the richness that you brought to the idea of motherhood. And it contrasts with the flatness that we have to the idea of virginity. And one of the questions that came, there was a question earlier about what's the feminist interpretation of these ideas, and why is it so important for male leaders to have a virgin, pure woman to justify their pedestal? I'd like to take that question and open it up in a sense to our speakers and say, what does that mean to you when you understand Mary being virgin? Because I don't think it means passivity. I don't think it means weak. So Ray, I'm going to let you tackle that one first, if you're willing to do so.
The first thing that comes to mind, Lo, is really that hymn in Luke's gospel that Mary proclaims in meeting with her cousin Elizabeth, as tradition tells us, that Magnificat, that it is not a passive hymn in any way, shape, or form, that it is one of speaks of power and authority and the righting of wrongs. It was interesting to note that in the early 80s, during all of the turmoil in Central and South America, that public recitation of the Magnificat in many of the Central American countries was banned because it was viewed as being so subversive. So it is a hymn of power, and that is Mary. And there is a quote from Elizabeth Johnson that speaks that we do, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that we do Mary an injustice and a disservice by putting her in, by ignoring the context in which she lived her life and the risks that were entailed in those snippets of her story that we know, and putting her into a circumstance that in a middle-class environment in a Western culture that takes away her power and her authority. I'm not doing the quote justice, and I wish I had it in front of me, but to answer your question, what comes to mind is that Magnificat, that authority that Mary, in her own voice, captured in the Christian scriptures, speaks and continues to speak today.
Thanks, Ray. Sophia, do you want to address that for a minute?
Yeah, many scholars have pointed out that the three monotheisms have written out the divine feminine. And yet when we think about the figure of Mary, I mean, she really almost brings it back in, doesn't she?
She does.
So in Islam, there's no divine human, but most definitely she is she brings back the idea of a sacred femininity into Islam. And think about it. Isa doesn't need, there's no man with Isa. There's God, with that brings him into being. It took Mary and it took God. And in Islam, God is genderless. Okay, so God's not a man, right? God's genderless. So Mary, a woman and a genderless entity, God, brings into being Isa. So that's very, very powerful. And of course, she's got a lot of supernatural qualities to her in that she's attributed with miracles, right? There's all this, wintertime fruit in the summer, summertime fruit in the winter. God speaks to her. In fact, some have, there was a sect of Islam, they were the Zahiri sect. They argued that she should be called a prophet or a prophetess, whatever, prophet. But most Muslims would say, no, she's not a prophet. But, what does the word prophet mean? Usually it means somebody who's contacted by God. Now, Mary doesn't exactly have a message, but she does bring forth Jesus, doesn't she? So, we've got some semantics going on. So she's a very powerful figure in Islam, regardless of how we're going to, of the words we use. She's got a lot of power.
She certainly does. Thank you. Thank you for that. Before I turn to you, Rini, I want, Ray, I was able, while you were talking, to bring up something that I'd like to share, which is a twist on the Annunciation. And it's a poem by Jan Richardson, who some of you may know, and it's called Gabriel's Annunciation. And this is that moment when Gabriel comes to ask her whether or not she will accept being the mother of this child. And this is told from Gabriel's point of view. And so I read you Gabriel's Annunciation. He's the angel. For a moment, I hesitated on the threshold. For the space of a breath, I paused, unwilling to disturb her last ordinary moment, knowing that the next step would cleave her life, that this day would slice her story in two, dividing all the days before from all the ones to come. The artist would later depict the scene, Mary dazzled by the archangel, her head bowed in humble assent, awed by the messenger who condescended to leave paradise to bestow such an honor upon a woman and a mortal. And yet I tell you, it was I who was dazzled, I who found myself agape when I came upon her reading at the loom in the kitchen. I cannot recall now. Only that the woman before me, blessed and full of grace, long before I called her so, shimmered with how completely she inhabited herself, inhabited the space around her, inhabited the moment that hung between us. Yet when the time came, when I stammered the invitation, history would not record the sweat on my brow, the pounding of my heart, nor would it note that I said, "Do not be afraid," as much to myself as to her. It was she who saved me. Her deliverance, her "let it be," not just a declaration to the divine, but a word of solace, to a soothing, a benediction for the angel in the doorway who would hesitate one last time for the space of a breath torn from his chest before wrenching himself away from her radiant consent, her beautiful and awful yes. That's a statement of power, not a helpless virgin. Rini, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Exactly. Women have been endowed with so much power all through the histories, all through the ancient mythologies we see. Sita, she was kidnapped. She was in this forest. She was kidnapped by one of the very, very powerful demons. Yet she had that power he couldn't touch her. She could just lay the line. He couldn't cross that line. Just by her willpower, he couldn't cross that line. And also the women, we are not those easy types, the weaklings, because she went through so much sacrifice. Mary went through so much sacrifice. To see your son crucified on that cross, can you imagine the feeling she had in her? Can you imagine your son hanging from that crucifix and being allowed to do that? So women have the power to give so much away, to give so much of sacrifice. They have that power. And it's not the weak women that have been showed all through history. We are very strong when we have the mother with us, when we have the divine power with us, and we can sacrifice things.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for that. We have a question that I don't want to ignore, that comes way back from the beginning. When Ray, you were asked to give the title of the book about Mary that you quoted at the end of your talk, I believe. Can you share that with us?
The title of my concluding quote that I used in my presentation was taken from the book, The Coming of God. It is by Maria Boulding, Boulding. It is not specifically about Mary, but it is about the Christian understanding. It is about the Christian understanding of Advent and preparation for Christmas and the celebration of Christ's birth. But Mary is referenced throughout it. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have some questions that the speakers want to share with one another that came up in the course of this? I thank you each for adding a new dimension to Mary for me. Sophia.
Yeah, I would like to ask Dr. Rini Ghosh about what she said about the Vedanta Society and Mary, and I really appreciated your talk. I'm just wondering about parallels of the sort of the archetype of Mary with Parvati in general.
Thank you, Sophia, for your comments. Yes, Mary is, our thing is very much connected with Hinduism, is connected with symbolism. So with Parvati is the question, first of all, of sacrifice and power. And, we seem to think in general that Mary was this immaculate, pure virgin. But when we go deeper into it, we see what power she had. And so Parvati had that all that power too. And Parvati's children, she had 4 children with all the symbolism of all the different emotions of what we feel in this world. And Mary had 1 child, but he was the reincarnation, as we think of him. He was the reincarnation of God. In Gita, it said that, yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever there is evil, whenever evil is imbalanced what is good in this world, then God reincarnates himself. So Parvati is the mother of Ganesh and of Lakshmi and of Saraswati. And Mary is the mother of that reincarnation of God who was needed at that time to bring the world into balance again between the good and evil. So there's a lot of connection between Parvati and Mary.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am also thinking, as the Guibord Center has spent a year before we really tackle some of the tough problems that are out there, we've spent a year looking at the issue of nonviolence as we understand it across faiths. And I wonder what it is to be so deeply connected to the sacred that we're able to move into the world and make the kinds of transformations and healings that Jesus called for, that her son called for. And Rini, you said it when you talked about it, what it must have been like for her at the foot of the cross, watching her son die a death that was a death of shaming, a death of suffocation, to be there, to stand there, and to not lose her faith, to be able, in the face of the suffering and the cruelty and the injustice of this world that we face today, how is it that we turn to something that is sacred and find the strength to go on, to be healing, to be transformational? And there is something of that in the midst of all of this. And I think that is the something about Mary as we begin to explore who was she? What filled in the gaps? How do we take her out of the boxes that we put her in and have the courage to experience her in that shattering, transformational way that changes our lives? And that's something that all of you have addressed very, very powerfully today. Let me give you the opportunity to take a moment to do a summary statement if you'd like. And Ray, would you like to go first? I'll stay in that order for a moment.
Sure, thanks, Lou. I think to summarize, Mary questioned. She wasn't afraid to ask questions. She stood on her own authority in the asking of those questions. She pondered the events and situations and circumstances that life presented to her. She stood on her own authority and challenged Jesus, ignored his response to her at the story of the wedding at Cana. And she turns and calls him to his own ministry in many ways, reminds him of his life path. And she stands in solidarity with all who have experienced pain and sorrow, risk, those who are called to courage. So those are universal themes that I heard this afternoon that transcend the world's religions. And I really appreciated hearing about the apparitions and it recorded shared by Dr. Sophia and Dr. Rini, and in the various, and it makes me wonder, as we go through these transitions and the magnitude of the events that we face in this day and age, perhaps there is a reason for those apparitions happening more and more, to call us back to the unifying aspects of compassion, of suffering with, and journeying and companioning one another.
Thank you, Ray. Sophia.
I very much like what Ray just said about suffering with and having compassion together with others, and that Mary represents that. So in Islam, Maryam is a very powerful symbol and also a mystery, because if the kalima, or the word of God, can enter Mary, what does that mean?
Yeah.
If Mary can be, spoken to by God, through the angel Gabriel, of course, but by God, what does that mean? It's such a powerful image of this very human woman. And one of the questions brought up this idea that we don't always know, there's many different ways to interpret these figures. And I spoke about this, that Sufis interpret the figure one way and that Zaharis think of Maryam as a prophet. There's just very many ways to look at Mary. And so she transcends not only our respective religious faiths, but our own understanding. And I think that's what's beautiful about her.
Thank you so much. My goodness, Rini.
I really enjoyed both Ray's and Sophia's thing about compassion, and she's so beautiful and so strong. One thing I realize is we're in the middle of a generation which we all want instant gratification. And Mary and Sita, all these women along the history, along the ages, have proved that sacrifice, we have to sacrifice something to gain that, whatever that target in life, what we are aiming for. Now we've become, we get one TV, the next day we want another TV. We have one car, the next day. It's all instant gratification. We want information at the touch of a button. When we did our research work and PhDs, we had to go to England, to go to India House to read about but now you don't need that. And so the life is getting so very superficial. We need the sacrifices of Mary, of Sita. We need that within us. We need to bring that feeling that we need to work hard for anything in life. So I've seen a lot of questions about how, this is a generation of what is happening to the women and to the men. We need to just sit down quietly, meditate, and sort of think, what can we do for the world? What each one of us can do, sacrifice a little.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rini. Thank you all for your wonderful opportunities for us to dig deeper and to be filled with that sense of wonder and curiosity and a deepening of our devotion. This is, I hope, the beginning of a conversation that will continue as we move through the year. One of the things this certainly shows is that our faiths, our different faiths, have so many things that are important that bring us together. And I thank all of you for being a part of the program, for our wonderful presenters, and also for all of you who are here. Thank you for being part of the Guibord Center. Thank you for your support. God bless, and thank you for being in this with us. Goodbye for today.